Chapter 7, Drawing with Precision. This is the chapter that I've referenced several times already that contains AccuDraw. So this chapter reviews the effects of using locks, snaps, AccuDraw, and AccuSnap to control precision drafting. The topics include locks, snap modes, AccuDraw, and AccuDraw shortcut key-ins. The tools discussed in this chapter are used in conjunction with drawing tools to create drawings with greater precision. These tools control accurate placement of elements by locking or constraining various settings. The first one is locks. Locks are drawing assistance tools that can be used to help produce drawings more effectively. There are settings that allow more control of the actions of various tools. These locks, to different degrees, control how MicroStation controls the cursor, data point accuracy, or groups of elements. Note, these locks should not be confused with the element lock function. The function accessed through edit lock allows the user to lock selected elements. The attributes and locations of locked elements cannot be changed, preventing accidental element manipulation. If an attempt is made to change a locked element, MicroStation will alert the user. The locks may be accessed from the MicroStation menu option, Settings, Locks, or from the MicroStation status bar at the bottom of the application window. So, Settings, Locks. There's your list of locks, or way down here in the status bar, also the list of locks. The Locks dialog is used to set each of the locks and the fence selection mode. It is accessed from the MicroStation menu options, Settings, Locks, Full, or Status Bar Locks pop-up menu option, Full. Each lock is enabled by toggling on the adjacent checkbox and settings selected to affect the use of each lock. Each lock performs a different function by controlling or constraining some portion of MicroStation. There's the Locks dialog. Also, you can access it from Settings, Locks, Full. Locks dialog. ACS plane, 3D only. When on, each data point is forced to lie on the active ACS XY plane with z equals 0. The active ACS is set in the Auxiliary Coordinates dialog, which is opened by choosing Auxiliary Coordinates from the Utilities menu. The grid lock, when on, each data point is forced to lie on the grid. There is a grid. You cannot currently see it because it is turned off. We did mention it before. That's under View Attributes. The grid lock causes you to snap to the grid. Level lock, when on, only elements on the active level can be selected. Elements not on the active level cannot be manipulated. So that's the level lock. Annotation scale lock, when on, the annotation scale is applied to any text or dimension that are placed in the model. The annotation scale is set through the Model Properties dialog. We'll talk more about annotation scale in another chapter, but that's the annotation lock. When that's on, text will scale based on the drawing scale. Graphic group lock. When on, any manipulation performed on one member of a graphic group is automatically performed on all members. If off, the member elements of the graphic group can be manipulated individually. Text node lock. When on, newly placed text is attached to empty text nodes, and text cannot be placed if there aren't any text nodes. We aren't going to necessarily talk about text nodes, but in this case, to explain further, that's to say that if you're placing text, you'd only be able to place it on text nodes. If there were no text nodes, it would not allow you to place text. Fence mode sets how the fence contents are determined for element manipulation. Fence selection mode is also a tool setting for fence placement tools in Fence Toolbox. That's when you draw a fence, which we will talk about. That is a fence, right? Inside means anything inside the fence is considered to be fenced. This is anything inside and overlapping the fence is considered to be part of that group. Clip is anything inside the fence, and the portions of things that cross the fence that are inside the fence, which is to say they're clipped at that edge, will be manipulated. Void means everything outside the fence is selected. Void overlap means everything outside and overlapping the fence is selected, and void clip is everything outside the fence and the portions of things that are outside the fence that cross the fence are clipped and considered part of that selection. Is that complicated enough? The snap section. The snap section contains controls that are used to determine how tentative points snap to elements. We will be talking about snaps right in the very next section. Axis section. The axis section contains controls that are used to adjust axis lock and related settings. You see it's set for a start angle of 0 and an increment of 90 degrees. That is the axis lock. Unit section. The unit section contains controls that are used to adjust unit lock and a related setting. We won't be talking about that much. And isometric lock, the section contains controls to determine how data points relate to the isometric plane. We won't be talking about that either. It's not what I would consider part of the basic essentials. Also available is a locks toolbox, which allows users to turn locks on and off. Clicking the tool has the same effect as selecting the checkboxes in the locks dialog, and it can be accessed from the MicroStation menu under Settings, Locks, Toggles, or the status bar locks pop-up menu option Toggles. This may be beneficial when constantly switching back and forth between multiple lock settings. So here you are, and toggles. And just like any toolbox, you can turn off and on the different items by right-clicking. So if there are things that you don't feel you'll be using very often, they might get in the way, and other tools that you use more often, you can switch those locks on and off. And those are the locks. Now let's talk about snap modes. When snap lock is on, how a tentative point snaps to an element is set by the active snap mode, or the override setting if one is active. The default snap mode can be set via the locks dialog under snap mode, or by the snap mode button bar. The active snap mode, or snap mode override, is indicated by the icon in the status bar. The snap mode can be accessed from the MicroStation menu options, Settings, Snaps, or Status Bar Snaps pop-up menu. So here we go. So Settings, Snaps, you get the button bar, just like that locks toolbox. These are your snaps down here. You notice that's the key point snap icon. And of course there's access to the button bar and to your multi-snaps, which we'll talk about. The item that has the filled dot next to it is your default snap. You can select another snap, and you'll notice that shows a different snap icon. And now the filled dot is near nearest, and that empty dot indicates where that default snap is going to default back to. So if I use something to snap, or do really any action, it's going to default back to my default snap. So when you select a snap, you use it just once and it goes back to the default snap. Or you can hold down Shift and click on the snap to change it. That changes the default snap for your session. Of course, just like any toolbox, you can switch on and off the snaps you want if there's snaps that you tend to use more often. The default snap, you'll notice, has the little grayed out overlay on it to indicate that it's the default snap, so that when I use a tool, it pops back to that default snap. This right here is the toggle of AccuSnap. You may have noticed the little yellow X's that pop up when I get near key points. And again, that's key point snap. So like end points, middle points, vertices, those are considered key points. And you see the little yellow X right there. That is for me to snap to. We also mentioned tentative snap. A tentative snap is sort of the old school way of doing things. AccuSnap gives you a little yellow snap that says, yes, you're about to draw from that point. And you just click, and there you go. It's a floating tentative. But you see how it's a little dotted plus sign there? If I hold down the 2-button chord that I mentioned before, it makes a much larger solid plus, and that is my tentative snap. I have not executed the tool. I have said tentatively that's where I want to snap to, and it says this is a key point. See, I can't snap in on anything that's not a key point. It just gives me a little dashed plus sign there. But if I get close enough to a key point, it jumps to that key point and says, ah, you're trying to snap to that. And then to execute the tool, then I enter a data point, and it accepts the snap. So there's AccuSnap, which provides you a interactive tentative, and then there's the actual tentative where you hold down the 2-button chord and you get a tentative snap. And if you want to get out of the tentative snap, you can just right-click to reset. So what do the different snaps do? They're fairly self-explanatory. The nearest snap will just snap to, I'm going to select the Smart Line tool. The nearest snap will snap to the nearest element anywhere, regardless of whether it's a key point. The key point snap snaps to specific key points, like endpoints, middle points, and vertices. The midpoint snap only snaps to midpoints. See, it's not snapping to the endpoint or the vertices, it's snapping right there to that midpoint. Center snap will snap to the center of solid objects or closed shapes, and also to the sort of centroid of chains and lines. It determines what the center. It's different than midpoint because with a circle you can snap to the center of the circle. That's not a circle, that's not a closed shape here. But you see, that's almost a closed shape. That's an arc. So it's snapping to the center of the arc. It's the difference between center and midpoint. With the midpoint snap, it would be snapping right here. With the center snap, it snaps in the geometric center of that area. Origin snap will snap to the origin of cells. We'll talk about cells in a later chapter. All cells have an origin point from which they're placed. The origin snap will snap to the origin of that. It'll also snap to the beginning point of any element, the origin of that element. That's where we started when we drew that element. That's where this element was started. Okay, so it'll snap to the beginning point as well. So it's the origin point of cells as well as the beginning point of elements. Bisector snap snaps to the midpoints of an entire element. Intersection snap will snap to the intersection of two lines. Just have to get near it and it will snap to it. You see? Tangent snap, the edge of the element being placed is constrained to be tangent to an existing element. The tentative point dynamically slides along the element to maintain the tangency as the pointer moves to finish placing the element. Tangent point snap, the edge of the element being placed is constrained to be tangent to an existing element at the tentative point. The tentative point does not move dynamically as the pointer moves, but is locked in place. And then perpendicular snap. Perpendicular snap, the line being placed is constrained to be perpendicular to the element. The tentative point slides dynamically along the element in order to maintain the perpendicularity as the pointer moves to finish placing the element. There are another number of other snaps that you may use. There's also multi-snaps. I'll show you what multi-snaps are available. So there's 3 multi-snaps. These are customizable. So if you want to combine 2 or more snaps and have that as a snap, what you can do is go to Settings, and see here's multi-snap 1, 2, and 3. The first one is intersection, key point, and nearest. Of course, once you have nearest selected, it's going to select the nearest element. Multi-snap 2 is intersection snap. Mind you, I'm not selecting these as I do this, but intersection snap, key point snap, and center snap. So you would get the intersections, you'd get key points like endpoints and midpoints, as well as center points. And that would be, it doesn't constrain you to only having, that one snap at a time. It allows you to have multiple snaps. So it would activate all of those key points. And of course, multi-snap 3, which is midpoint, intersection, and center. And of course, as you can see with checkboxes, you can customize these. Another tool for precision drawing is AccuSnap. AccuSnap enhances many of the standard snap mode settings by displaying and automatically snapping to the next tentative snap point as the pointer is moved over an element. I just did demonstrate this, and so we're going to go over the actual tool. With AccuSnap enabled, a tentative snap point is very rarely needed to be placed manually. Now, tentative snap points can still be entered manually with AccuSnap enabled. AccuSnap can be toggled on or off by clicking the Toggle AccuSnap button on the Snap Mode button bar located at the far left. This is the Toggle AccuSnap button. If I toggle it off, I'm not getting the tentative hints, and I'm not getting the little yellow X's. But I can still enter a tentative point. Now, right now that's a lot of small lines, so let's demonstrate that on something that's there. So I have key point snap, and those are my tentative points, including the center. AccuSnap works in conjunction with the current snap mode setting as demonstrated, and for the most part is similar in operation to the manual method of tentative snap points, minus the button presses. How close to an element or a key point the pointer must be before AccuSnap finds it is governed by the locate tolerance setting in the input category of the preferences dialog. The AccuSnap settings dialog contains a series of controls that affects the behavior of AccuSnap. Controls in this dialog are grouped into 3 tabbed sections: General, Elements, and Feel. You can access the settings dialog by right-clicking on the Toggle AccuSnap button and selecting Settings, General, Elements, and Feel. You can also get there by going to Settings, Snaps, and AccuSnap. That'll bring up the AccuSnap settings dialog as well. The AccuSnap Settings General tab contains controls to enable and disable AccuSnap and to define the ways it operates. The AccuSnap Settings Elements tab controls whether or not AccuSnap snaps to curves, dimension, texts, and or meshes. When snapping is turned off for any of these, AccuSnap will not snap to that particular element type, but it will display an icon to show that the element is being ignored. The AccuSnap Settings Feel tab controls the feel group of the AccuSnap settings and allows for the setting of AccuSnap sensitivity when snapping to elements. Another tool is AccuDraw, which evaluates such parameters as the current pointer location, the previous entered data point, the last coordinate directive, the current tool's needs, and any directive entered via shortcut key-ins in the AccuDraw options. AccuDraw then generates the appropriate precision coordinates and applies them to the active tool. This is AccuDraw. This is what it looks like when it's a floating toolbox or floating dialog. It can also be docked. For the most part, by default, it is docked down at the bottom. You see it does display XY coordinates. When you enter a data point, the Accudraw Compass appears. Right now it's in rectangular mode, and you can see it gives XY values, and that allows you to specify in XY. You see, as I've already entered an X, drag this up here so it's easier to see. Since I already entered an X value of 10, now it's showing the Y value. So it's just rectangular coordinates. There's also a polar mode, which allows you to specify distance and angle. So for example, again with the 10 distance, that's locked in now, and I can specify an angle. And then to accept that, you just enter a data point. This is sort of analogous to what we had done earlier with the place line tool. Without Smart Line, without using AccuDraw, we were able to put in a length in the place line tool. This allows you that kind of flexibility with all of the tools. When it's in 3D mode, of course, it will allow you to additionally specify a Z coordinate. And as the book says, the most recognizable AccuDraw feature is its compass, visible only when AccuDraw is active and in control of the MicroStation coordinate input. The compass acts as both a status indicator and a focus for input. Normally, AccuDraw Compass does not appear until the first data point is placed after selecting a tool. AccuDraw's behavior changes slightly with tools that utilize dynamics before the first data point. The Place Text and Place Active Cell tools are examples of such tools. Instead of waiting for the first data point to display the compass, AccuDraw activates the compass at the last data point location. In this way, the element can be placed with respect to this location by using any of AccuDraw's relative directives. The shape of the compass indicates whether it's in rectangular or polar mode. If you noticed, it's square in rectangular mode and round in polar mode. And how was I switching back and forth? Very simple. When the AccuDraw window has focus and you tap the space bar, it switches between polar and rectangular mode. Most of the time, a combination of mouse movements and keyboard entry is required to place elements in AccuDraw. It is not necessary to delete existing information in the AccuDraw window to input new information. And you can see that it's a little bit difficult to demonstrate that by just, you can tab from field to field, and then as you type, it locks that field, and then you go to the next field, and without deleting it, you can put in new information. You just start typing. That's what that means. Creating precision offsets is a fundamental function of the design process. AccuDraw performs this function by utilizing tentative points. These can be input manually, or the process can be further streamlined using AccuSnap. So one thing that's really handy is, say you want to start a line at a distance relative to a starting point. I don't want to start my line here on the corner of this building, but I do want to start a line going this way or going this way from a point that's 10 feet from the corner of that building. If you give AccuDraw focus and tap O, it places the compass, and I have not entered a data point, so I've not yet actually started drawing a line. This is just a little, I think they call it the indexing line from AccuDraw. So I can enter 10 into the X dialog, the X field of the dialog. It locks that distance, and you notice it's sticky. This indexing here, it'll stick to that 90-degree angle. Then I can enter my data point, and that's where my line begins. And AccuDraw does save the last length that you specified. So the last distance I specified was 10 feet. So you see that little line that appears on the end of the cursor is showing that that's the length that it wants to go to. But of course you can change the line. It just gives you a little snap to that distance right there because it remembers. So I did point out that it does stick to the points on the compass at the 90-degree angles. If you want to lock that, just simply strike enter, and now it is stuck on the x-axis. Strike enter again to unlock it. Strike enter, and now it's stuck to the y-axis. This allows you to draw with, say, place line or place smart line in a manner that's very similar to that draw orthogonal shape tool. So you can draw at 90-degree angles. You can also do math with AccuDraw. So say there's a point. I'm going to draw myself a little point here. Start here, go out a random amount of space. Okay, and I'm just going to draw a little line here. Now, this line, this end of this line does line up with the corner of this building, but I want to draw a line that's half the distance. So from here, halfway here, but where's the midpoint? I don't know. So I can start my line, snap to the end of that line, and hit divide by 2. I hit just the slash on the keyboard to the left of the shift button, and that allows me to do math. They call it the AccuDraw calculator. Now I'm at 11.7 feet. I can actually multiply by 2, and now it's 23.4. So you can multiply and divide. A couple other things to note about AccuDraw. There is a settings dialog. To access that, you go settings, AccuDraw, and you see there's a number of settings that you can change to suit your needs, such as the color of the compass and the coordinates. Also, you can change whether it's rectangular or polar here in the settings. For the most part, you won't need to change any of the settings for AccuDraw because the default settings work just fine for what you're trying to achieve with AccuDraw. But be aware that you can access the settings if you need to troubleshoot something. And of course, the final interesting thing about AccuDraw is you can enter commands. You saw me, when I gave it focus, hit the 0, and that moves the compass to whatever point I'm snapping to, or whatever floating point I have. Right? That's the set origin function. If you hold down Shift and tap the question mark, it's going to bring up a list of other commands that you can enter. You can enter a lot of different shortcuts into AccuDraw. That's where that enter for smart lock, the space for changing the mode between rectangular and polar, O for set origin, view for view rotation, top rotation. You can use all of these different key-ins when AccuDraw has focus to make those actions happen. In fact, you can enter new key-ins, your own combinations of letters, to enter into AccuDraw. And again, to get that list, it's Shift question mark. Essentially, you're just typing a question mark. Because question mark, you need to hit Shift to type. So question mark brings up this list. If you do want an exhaustive list of all the AccuDraw shortcut key-ins, they are available on page 7-14 and 7-15 in Chapter 17 of the CAD Essentials Training Guide. Exercise 7.1, placing additional topo elements. In fact, we're going to place a missing fire hydrant, or more accurately, we're going to move a missing fire hydrant to the correct location. To do this, first we need to open up the topo file. Your topo file is the topord01.dgn. It is located in the survey folder, so we're going to go File, Open, or if you're already at the File, Open Dialog, go up a level, look for the survey folder, so eProjects, your dataset number, survey, and Topo RD01. Now this does look very similar, and the reason why this looks similar is because we do have most of the same files referenced into this file. I'm going to do a fit view so we can start off this. Once again, we're going to be working between stations 206 and 208, so I'm simply going to go Edit, Find, Replace Text. 206 is incidentally already in there. I'm going to hit Find. It's going to take me right to station 206, and then I'm going to use my mouse wheel to just pan down just a little bit so that I can see where I'll be working. There's a sidewalk we drew earlier in the other file. It is referenced in, as well as the building. Let's just take a minute to look around. This is the fire hydrant that we're going to be moving. It is not in the right location. So someone placed that fire hydrant in the wrong location, and we're going to go ahead and fix that. So first things first, make sure that AccuDraw is active. You do that by toggling it from this button right here. If you don't see AccuDraw, look for it. If you don't see it, dock down here, toggle this. If you still don't see it popping up, toggle it a few times, see what changes about the screen, and see if you can locate it, because maybe it's docked somewhere else. But here's AccuDraw. I'm going to select the Rotate View tool up from the top of the View window. I have it set for 2 points. I am going to snap. Remember, we talked about snaps to 207 and 208, and now the view is rotated so it's nicely oriented on my screen. Now in this exercise, in this case, they have us drawing a line using AccuDraw, and we're using that line as another point to snap to move the fire hydrant. I'm going to show you two ways to do this. The first way, they say, is to select Smart Line, and they say don't worry about what level you're drawing on in this case, because we're going to delete this line. It is just a construction element. So really what you could do is you could come down to a scratch level, because we're just drawing a scratch element. It says place a tentative point at the intersection of the center line at station 206 and the tick mark. I'm zooming in, rolling my wheel mouse. So you see there's the little AccuSnap, little yellow X. I'm entering a data point. It says to enter a tentative point. I'm entering a data point. Okay, the next step is making sure that the X field in AccuDraw has focus, and you do that by moving along the X axis, because if I move along the Y axis, eventually the focus goes to the Y. So I'm moving along the X axis, and it says enter a value of 68. You'll notice the X is now locked. It's highlighted. That means that field is locked. And you'll see that now I have a distance from my point of origin of 68 feet. It's not the distance, not the length of the line, but the distance from that point. It's just the distance from that point on the x-axis. Let's see. The next step is to enter a distance for the y field, which now has focus, a value of 60. And then we're going to enter a data point to accept. You'll notice it wants to draw another line, so we're going to hit the reset button to exit out. So we're going to use the move tool. So what you want to do is come up here to your tasks, locate the copy tool and left press with the data button so that this opens up, and we're going to select move. If you zoom into the fire hydrant, you see it's snapping to all sorts of places, but you can tell that this is a cell. We have not yet talked about cells, but what I did tell you about cells is that they have origin points. So let's find out what the origin of this cell is by using our snaps. So let's click on the snap, select origin snap. This is just a temporary snap, so as soon as we do an action, it goes back to our default snap. And you see, no matter where it is that I mouse over this cell, it's showing me that the snap point that I'll be snapping to is the origin. So I can actually click here, and it still attaches at the origin point. I'm going to zoom out, and you see it has defaulted back to our key point snap. And now I'm going to snap to the end of that line. That's great. Now I can delete that line. That's a lot of extra steps for what we were trying to do. So now I'm going to go ahead and move this fire hydrant somewhere else and show you another method for that. I'm selecting the move tool. I'm setting my snap to origin snap and zooming in. I'm getting a hold of that cell by the origin. And I can still use my pan tool by pressing down the mouse wheel without losing that right there. So we remember the origin point for that line was the intersection of the tick mark at the baseline. And we can set the origin for AccuDraw at that point by tapping O. Okay, so there's our compass. Well, that must mean that we can use AccuDraw with the move tool as well. I do have the X field with its focus, so I'll type 68. I'm going to hit tab. Everyone knows tab goes from one field to another. Type in 60. I can't see where that fire hydrant is, but I know that I had it from that origin point and entered those coordinates into AccuDraw. So I'm going to enter a data point and see what happened. And sure enough, the fire hydrant has moved to the end of where that line was. You can draw with AccuDraw. You can use the other tools like move and copy with AccuDraw. It works with a lot of the MicroStation tools. Continuing with exercise 7.1, we're going to be placing a missing building. Because it's an existing building, we're going to use the building underbar EP level. So from the attributes toolbar, select the level drop down and select building underbar EP. The next thing we're going to do is zoom into that same location that we've been working at, 207 and 208. So just go to Edit, Find Replace Text, put in 207. Oops. Helps if you put in the right station number. Click on Find. It's going to zoom you down right here. And as I've said before, let's go ahead and rotate this view so that it matches the screen. So I'm selecting the Rotate View tool, making sure it's set for 2 points. I'm just going to snap to the, I snapped to the midpoint of that tick mark, and so I'm going to go ahead and just snap to the midpoint of 208. And there we go. Move this up this way a little bit. I know that the building is going to be somewhere in this area. I don't exactly know where it is yet because they're going to give us some coordinates. First thing I'm going to do is look for the key in browser, because we're going to be using a key in command for the key in browser to locate these coordinates. So here we go. Utilities key in is one way to get to it. Alternatively, it should be or could be available from the primary toolbar if you have it activated. I think by default the key in browser is not checked on your primary toolbar, so if you want to right click and then check key in, you can then access the key in browser that way. You can also, in the middle of the screen, strike the enter key and it'll bring up a quick dialog for the key in browser, but bear in mind as soon as you mouse off of that it's going to disappear, and I don't like having to deal with that, so I'm just going to bring up the key in browser as a dialog here, And we're going to select the Place Smart Line tool, I believe. Yes, Place Smart Line tool. And here's your key in. We're looking for a specific coordinate. We know that the beginning point of this building, the point we're going to draw from, the origin of this, is XY. That's the command for locating a coordinate, equals 855, 489 is the X, and 1191686 is the Y. And since I've already got Place Smart Line active, when I strike enter, it places the Accudraw Compass, and I've already got a line going. So in the Accudraw Compass, I'm going to enter a distance of 44 and an angle of 180. It already has that set because I am stuck to the x-axis. Enter a data point, and there's my first line. Next step is I'm moving down. You'll notice that because I am snapping to that axis right there, it's setting my angle for 90 degrees. That's great. I'm going to enter a distance of 27 and enter a data point. And notice how I'm using tab to switch between the two fields of AccuDraw. And I could enter the distance of 27, but remember how AccuDraw remembers your last distance. I know my next distance is 27. I'm just going to go ahead and enter that. Moving down. I'm running out of desk here, so I'm sort of my mouse is not snapping to the axis quite as well. And you see that the distance field in AccuDraw is still active. My angle is 90, so I'm entering 38. And then a data point. Indexing along here. And it's snapping to that. And then my distance is 71. Now there's a couple things we can do. We can enter a distance of 71, and it's going to draw the line all the way out to here. And that is in line with that point right there, because ultimately we want to draw one more line to connect to that. Alternatively, with AccuDraw having focus, we can strike enter, and it's going to lock that axis. And then we can just snap to this, and that draws that line out to there. So it's now definitely lined up with this point, and we can just finish the building. So there's a couple of options of ways to use AccuDraw to draw a building, but the main point being the angles, the distance, using that axis lock. Once you accept that data point, the exercise is over, and we are moving on to the next chapter.